Hey Rooted Wings community, I want to jump on here real quick and just engage with you all for a minute on something that I have seen come up in conversation here in this community page a lot. And it's becoming more and more clear and apparent that there are two sides of this fence in regards to those who are for us continuing to shelter at home, to wear the mask, to be restricted in our freedoms and in our liberties. And then there are those who are very much for doing as Governor DeSantis did and completely reopening, giving us back all of our freedoms and liberties, taking off the mask, opening up the sanctuaries. I fall on that side heavily. So just so you know that when you are engaging on this page, you're engaging with someone who is extremely educated and intelligent and who favors us moving in congruence with the science and the data. And that is fine if that is not where you stand. However, I will encourage anyone in this community to deal with facts and data and not emotion. I will not tolerate the name calling, the cursing over because you can't get your point across with data and facts, and so you turn to the F word and to calling people Karen. Sorry, it's not adult. It's not civil exchange of ideas. It doesn't benefit anyone. It just makes people pissed and want to get off of the page. So that's not what we do here. I want to anchor us in where we're at now, and then to try to encourage hopefully some thought as to why you have people like myself and experts who are brilliant and who are urging us to go forward with reopening and to not do as the governor of California is, which is these nightmare Candyland metrics, which are virtually impossible for a large state and large counties, free citizens to ever get ahead of, and to constantly feel like we're just walking on eggshells with these metrics. So just to anchor us, I want to remind us that the duty of our elected public servants is to be analyzing our data and the science where we're at now and to move us in congruence with that data and the science, and not to be pointing to the past, which has outdated and overestimated and blown out of proportion ideas and models and figures that never materialized, and to, because you're pointing to the past, keep us in this suspended reality that doesn't match with the current science and the data. So that's what we saw with Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida today in a good way. He has been looking at the science and the data and has experts at the table, and he rightly decided it was time for his large state of Florida to swing wide open and to take away all of these policies and mandates that have been burdening free citizens. And I would encourage our state of California to do as Ron DeSantis did. There, at this point in time, if you were to take away everything from the past, all the fears of the past, all the data games of the past, all the poor modeling of the past, and only look at what we now know right now currently, I'll pull this up actually because I think it's going to be interesting to go through. Let me turn this. Okay. And I'm going to source everything below with citations so you can do your due diligent research, which I encourage. What we now know currently, if you were to take out everything, all the thoughts that we had prior, and only stand on the ground we're on right now, and to look through this data, and with this data to choose what you're going to do, which I think is this is public policy. That's what you have to do. Then I don't think we would be where we're at right now with a governor telling us that we are still in a red zone and you still can't go to church. And at best, in the future, 50% of your restaurant is going to be filled and 50% of your sanctuary. That is at best in California. There is nothing better. That's it. That's what you get to look forward to. So you tell me how that's justifiable, given that we know now that this specific virus it bears an IFR of between 0.003% and 0.5% under the country's mortality age. This is straight off the CDC. This is not emotion. And that's another thing I see a lot with people who want to bring in the emotion. We're dealing with data and facts. Data and facts don't have emotion. You can react emotionally, but the data and the fact says this is what it is. Do with it as you want. Public policy should inform us to then make the best decision from a science and a data perspective and to move forward in congruence with that data and the science. Data and the science tells us 0.003% to 0.5%, given our best collective information we have on this virus, is the IFR. Infected fatality rate is always going to be higher than that of a mortality rate. So the mortality rate is going to drop even lower than this 0.03% to 0.5%. So at best, we know that that's the actual threat of the infection fatality rate of this virus that it bears. The recovery rate on the flip side of that is 99.5% to 99.9% under country mortality age. And country mortality age, just means that the average age of death in our country. So you're looking at the demographic right below that, all the way to age 0. So you're looking at a recovery rate on an entire population below the mortality age of 99.5% to 99.9%. So tell me how you can lock down and keep a state suppressed and our constitutional rights completely affected and suspended, our First Amendment rights totally infringed upon, going all the way into like the best possible. How can you do that? How is that narrowly tailored when we know that the recovery rate is 99.5% to 99.9% of free citizens who catch this thing? It doesn't make sense. Doesn't hold up. We know that the 80% of positive cases bear no symptoms. And again, I'm going to link all the sources so you don't think that I am just spouting off. These are legitimate scientific sources. Median age of the deceased in most countries are over 80 years old. So again, we know the demographic that is most hardly hit. We know that when we initially made these decisions to put everyone into lockdown, young and old, take the kids out of school, everyone stays home, which was a bad decision because we know a transmission, especially from New York, occurs at home. We made these decisions before we were informed with this information, the science and the data, that the median age of the deceased in most countries is over 80 years old. That's our most vulnerable, okay? There are experts suggesting that the herd immunity threshold is between 20% to 25%. That's much different than when we came out of the gate thinking that herd immunity would be some super high 60 to 80%. Well, that we weren't thinking in terms of T-cell immunity. That is an experts have looked at T-cell immunity and said because of that and because of information we have from other countries who have gone through the curve from the cruise ships, that herd immunity most likely is much lower, 20% to 25%. We're seeing this again and again, and all the sources are going to be linked below. We also know that this is one that bears incredibly low risk to our kids as vectors and fatalities at a rate of 0% in San Diego County in California. So again, narrowly tailored is a requirement when it comes to the protection of our rights and liberties. You cannot go and mandate an entire population and call it narrowly tailored. It's not, especially knowing now that this virus is not the atomic bomb that what we assumed would leave 2.2 million Americans dead. It simply is not. You can't get that with the IFR data that we now have. You simply cannot. And with the herd immunity threshold, it's impossible to reach that. This is another really important thing is the California, and again, I'm in California, so this is where I'm speaking from. California Emergency Service Act, Chapter 7, Article 13, State of Emergency, Section 8629. The governor shall proclaim the termination of a state of emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. That is law. So given all of that, given that he is required by law, Gavin Newsom, to declare a termination of a state of emergency. Okay, well, who's his check and balance, right? That's a good question. The legislature. If the governor doesn't do it on his own by proclamation of the governor, then it must be by concurrent resolution of the legislature declaring it at an end. Great. Well, the legislature in California is on break through January 6th. So we're in a really bad situation here. We have a governor who is not acting as Governor DeSantis in Florida. The governor in California is continuing to hold us hostage to a metric system of nightmare Candyland colors that are going to be virtually impossible for us to rise out of. And we're still teetering all the way on the very lowest, most restrictive level, when we have completely underwhelmed hospitals and ICUs year over year. And we are not facing a healthcare crisis where we're not going to be able to manage those who do get sick by this and end up in the hospital. The reason that we almost went into the most restrictive tier in San Diego was because 700 kids tested positive in a neighboring college and one ended up in the hospital. No deaths. So what I would urge as an anchor when we're having these conversations and when we are speaking the truth, when we are tagging our elected officials, when we're emailing them, when we're setting up Zoom calls. I got out of a call with Kristen Gaspar. She's one of our county supervisors earlier today. What we need to be doing is driving the point that we must be moving in congruence with our current science and data. If we are not doing that, then we are failing at public policy. Every one of our elected public servants is. And tag Gavin Newsom on that. He needs to be held accountable to the fact that he is not proclaiming a termination of a state of emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. And guess what? Our conditions do warrant a termination of state of emergency. We are not in a state of emergency. You cannot define what we are currently in as a state of emergency. Our state is not overwhelmed. Guess what? Our state is so not overwhelmed that Gavin Newsom has been able, under the state of emergency, to change 400 laws and counting, and even do a roundtable and sign an executive order that bans the sale of gas-powered vehicles in 2035. If it was a state of emergency, the gentleman would have no time for that. So we have to be realists in how we deal with our current science and data and how we move forward. And I would encourage you in conversation to continue to drive that point home, that we must look at our current science and data, restrain from emotional games, because that's not going to benefit a healthy dialogue and exchange of intelligent ideas in science and data, and to encourage our elected public servants to move us forward in congruence with our current science and data, and to declare a termination of the state of emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant, as is their legal duty. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and continue to seek and speak the truth.